Ghost of Yotei is shaping up to be an amazing sequel, and we have some info from Sucker Punch on how the sequel will improve upon the already fantastic Ghost of Tsushima. And I have a really interesting new observation after going over the reveal trailer again, so let's get you up to speed. One aspect I think Ghost of Yotei can really improve over Tsushima is the open world side content. The Fox Shrines, for example, were a cool idea, but they got pretty repetitive if you did all of them. And the same was kind of true for the bamboo challenge, the hot springs, and the haikus. The devs are aware of this too, as they mentioned the following regarding the sequel. One challenge that comes with making an open world game is the repetitive nature of doing the same thing over again. We wanted to balance against that and find unique experiences. Fortunately, Iki Island already showed a ton of improvement in that department with the new animal shrines that included a flute minigame, while also adding some engaging new activities like the archery challenges and the memories of Jin's past. Considering the jump in quality from the base game to the DLC, I have high hopes that we'll see some varied and engaging side content in Ghost of Yotei, which is extra important considering there is now a much larger map to fill. I also think this bigger map will put a larger emphasis on traveling by horse, which is another mechanic that has some room for improvement. The feeling of riding a horse in the original was great, especially on the PS5 with the included haptics, but combat-wise there wasn't much you could do with it, which is something the Iki DLC improved on once again. I had a ton of fun with the horse charge ability, especially after adding the horse armor on top, so I would love to see some more combat related skills for your mount, maybe even full on mounted combat. I'm also curious if the addition of wild horses now means we are able to tame them, but that is just speculation. Now we are of course getting a new protagonist in Ghost of Yotei, and while Atsu is still shrouded in mystery, I spotted a very interesting detail on her ghost mask, one that Mindbullet in our comments also noticed. In Japan, there is a tradition called kintsugi, where a broken object is repaired and the lines are marked with gold, and in doing so, you treat the broken parts as something that adds to the history of an object. And when you take a closer look at Atsu's mask, what do you see? Golden lines in a very irregular pattern, almost as if it was shattered and repaired before. So that at the very least means that this mask was very important to someone, otherwise they wouldn't go through the trouble of repairing it in this way. To me, it either means the mask is very old and Atsu inherited it from someone, or it means a lot to Atsu and someone broke it in a fight, which might be part of the reason why she's traveling to Hokkaido. Either way, it paints the ghost mask as a very important object, implying Atsu has already learned or is trying to learn the ways of the ghost. Let me know your take in the comments, just thought it was interesting to mention this. Of course, Jin's gradual transformation into the ghost was a main part of Tsushima's story, as he learned a more unorthodox fighting style for a samurai. I'm obviously expecting both stealth and open combat to be an option in the sequel, but it will be interesting to see if Atsu has to go through a similar sort of development, or if she's already adept at stealth and assassinations from the start. And while I still have a ton of questions about the sequel, one of my biggest requests has already been fulfilled, as it looks like we're getting a lot more weapons in Ghost of Yotei. In the first game, Jin only ever used his katana in melee combat, with a smaller tanto for assassinations. But Atsu has already shown she can dual wield katanas, and we've seen her wield a kusarigama too. And while I'm still not entirely sure if this shot is Atsu as well, if it is, we can add a giant nodachi blade to the list as well. Jin did have a suite of tools and ranged weapons available to him, and while we're only able to confirm a rifle for now, I'm guessing Atsu will have a variety of tools and ranged options at her disposal too. The one question I still have though is what this variety in weapons will mean for the stance system. Switching stances in the middle of combat to counter different enemy types took some getting used to, but it ended up being one of my favorite features in Ghost of Tsushima. Titles like Nioh and Rise of the Ronin also applied stances for their various weapon types, so maybe every weapon gets multiple. I just hope the stance system returns in some form, even if it only applies to your katana. And by the way, if you want, you can enter in our giveaway for the game by checking the link in the pinned comment. Just make sure you're a subscriber of the channel if you want to enter, and good luck if you do. Another thing I loved about the original is the guiding winds and the other ways in which the game naturally guided you to explore. Ghost of Tsushima of course had no minimap, which meant that you had to rely on environmental clues to find hidden collectibles and side missions. With the improved power of the PS5 and the larger map, I imagine there's a lot more to see in the open world of the sequel, so we'll need new visual clues or animal guides like the sword songbirds to help us find our objectives. Since Tsushima was Sucker Punch's first attempt at this kind of system, I'm very excited to see what they're cooking up for the sequel. The guiding winds are already teased to return, so I'm guessing that means the minimap stays absent, even in this larger region. One complaint I know people had was the way it pointed you in a straight line towards the objective, which sometimes meant the winds would want you to pass through an ocean or a mountain and you'd have to find your own way around it. I personally kind of enjoyed that, but I can see why a lot of people want a more direct guide that leads them along the correct path all the way through. So here's hoping they add that as an option for the sequel. And exploration in general definitely has some room for improvement, which might sound strange as Ghost's exploration was already excellent. Side quests and open world activities were all very rewarding as they gave you unique unlocks that you could not get anywhere else. But there were also some weaker aspects, like the random encounters you would sometimes find riding around the island. Most of these would simply involve you rescuing a villager or an abandoned cart of supplies from a small group of enemies, which meant that the surprise factor wore off after a couple of encounters. Red Dead 2 of course set the golden standard for random encounters in open world games, like one where you'd run into a prison escape and you decide if you let the prisoners walk or not. So I hope we get to see more encounters like those to make the larger map even more engaging. Now, one of the most surprising things in Ghost of Tsushima was of course the choice ending. We spent the entire game playing through a linear story, only to be presented with a heartbreaking choice at the end of it. We did learn from Sucker Punch that players would have greater control over her, so Atsu's story, than in the previous game. And yeah, I would love to have some more major choices like this over the course of the campaign. Maybe one at the end of each story chapter. The fact that you get a unique dye for the ghost armor as well as a result of your choice was the cherry on top, and if these major choices return, I hope we'll get similar rewards that show the choices Atsu has made on her journey. Ghost of Tsushima also had some light platforming elements, especially in the shrine activities where you had to scale beautiful hills and mountains. Jin only had his grappling hook as a tool to spice up the rock climbing and jumping, so I'm hoping Atsu has more tools and skills to traverse Hokkaido. Not only would it make shrines a lot more fun, provided they are returning of course, it would also give you a wonderful advantage to use in stealth. If you have a quick way to access rooftops, you can use that to break line of sight or create new opportunities to sneak up on someone. Just look at the Arkham series use of a grappling hook for stealth to see how well that works. Either way, I'm not against having more platforming in Ghost of Yotei, especially if the views are going to be as beautiful as the first game, but I would like more variety than just the grappling hook. We also shouldn't forget how much stuff was added to the original post-launch. Of course, Iki Island and the Legends mode are standouts, but there's a lot of smaller stuff I really appreciated as well. Ghost of Tsushima had an awesome New Game Plus mode, and features like a loadout system, a new lethal difficulty, and replayable enemy camps and duels were also added after release. I'm hoping we'll see many of these features on day one in Ghost of Yotei, but even if they don't, we know how generous Sucker Punch has been in the past, so I'm expecting them to be a free edition post-launch at the very worst. And while it's a bit of a smaller complaint, I would like to see some improvement in the upgrade department, specifically when it comes to weapons. I loved how armor upgrades changed the look of a gear set and gradually increased the power of the perks, and the charm system was also pretty good. Some charms were clearly better than others though, and I'd also argue that the coolest ones were only added in New Game Plus, like the one that summons a lightning strike, so I hope that base game Ghost of Yotei has some of the more unique ones as well. But when it comes to your swords and your bows, you mostly get a simple damage increase. Sure, you could change the look with sword kits, but that did not change anything about the weapon's performance. And I'm not saying I think the game needs 100 different katanas with unique perks, but maybe some choices to make your weapons fit a certain playstyle better could be interesting. A charm-like system for your blade, where you can use weapon perks similar to those from Legends, would also work, but just something to make upgrading your main weapon more interesting. I know I'm asking for a lot here, but Ghost of Tsushima is one of my favorite games we ever covered on the channel, and I have very high hopes for the sequel. When we learn more, we'll of course let you know, so subscribe to not miss our next video and leave a like if you enjoyed this one. If you want, you can watch our reveal trailer breakdown by clicking on the screen, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye!